Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Talent Talks. Today, I am so excited. Okay, by the way, the Talent Talks name, it's like carved in cement. I've heard back from you guys, good feedback, like the play on words. So we're solid there. No more suggestions needed, although some of them were pretty great. Uh, but today I have the pleasure of talking about one of my favorite conversations, which is job ads. And with me, I have Daniel Fellows from Get Optimal. Hey, Daniel.
Hey, Jen. Fine. How are you?
I am fabulous, and I am so glad to have you here with me today. And for those listening, watching that haven't met you before, can you tell us just a little bit about Daniel and your background and a little bit about Get Optimal?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the founder of Get Optimal. We launched in September 2019 in London. We are a job ad optimization platform. From my time at Indeed and now with Optimal, I know a great deal about the problem and the global challenges that we're solving. My background, I suppose I'm just sort of obsessed with technology, really, solving problems and really using as a marketeer my previous roles, use that level of empathy to help people get through big challenges. I've worked at Indeed, for Microsoft, at Vodafone, and way back in the days, Nokia. Jen, I'm sure our younger viewers may not remember Nokia, but you and I were firm opposition corners with AT&T and Nokia.
I was just going to say.
Before this tiny company called Apple rolled into town, closely followed by this even tiny company called Samsung, and then suddenly my beloved Nokia were no more. So really, a marketing technology background. And I've recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, I have completely obsessed with job ads. It's a burning desire. It's a huge source of passion. And as I'm sure you're going to go into, man, it's frustrating that no one else shares our passion.
Let me tell you. Okay, so when I was at AT&T, they were the bane of my existence. And as I talk to TA leaders, if we're having drinks somewhere, inevitably the conversation of the job ad or the job description, it all comes up with a variety of different conversations around it. But when we get to the nuts and bolts of the situation, the data shows that people are looking at your job advertisements more than any other single piece of content. And it is the worst, right? Like most people just don't give a crud. So tell me a little bit about Optimal and what you're doing to help improve the job ad just from the start.
So you're absolutely right that the first time a lot of people come into contact with your business is through your job ad. It is the most important piece of collateral if you're a recruitment consultant, but if you're a direct employer, an internal like yourself at AT&T, it's that moment where you can make a huge difference to the perception and the impression a candidate who is also a customer, let's never ever forget that, has upon your business. We built a 40 odd point algorithm, and all of these elements, once they're applied to a job ad, enable a 30% increase in the performance of that job ad. When we say increase, we mean things like quality of candidates, which again, from 1,000 odd meetings at Indeed, you've got the whiteboard, you're chatting to people like yourself, staffing agencies, recruiters and boards. And the first question is, ladies and gentlemen, what would all of you like more of? Quality, quality, quality. So again, that quality piece is key. Inclusivity, as we've already touched upon as well, it's driving more inclusive candidates to your job ads, and removing gender bias is a key component of that as well. So we enable the job ads to be optimized. I mean, that's really the key thing, but optimized for SEO, so for search engine optimization. Because again, I remember my first meeting with my old boss, Kevin Walker. He said, Dan, if people can't find your job, that's a terrible accent. I was like half American, half Irish. I impersonate Kevin again. He's quite a big guy as well. But if people can't find your job ad, they can't apply for your job ad. And we used to have this little sort of trick that we'd play on some of our clients. Apologies to anybody watching. We'd go into the meeting, we'd have all of their team, it'd be really exciting, we'd all be buzzing. And then we'd ask them all to get out their cell phones and try and find the last job they had posted, without searching by the brand, just the job title and the location. And we must have done this hundreds of times. And I remember Ashley, who's working at Joveo, we did a lot of meetings together at Indeed, and we used to do it and just kind of pass a look over each other going, that makes the point. No one could ever find the job they were posting. So again, we increase the visibility of your job ad to search engines, which when you think most folks are now using either Indeed or LinkedIn or Facebook or Google for Jobs, we understand, and we, in a very moral way, we manipulate those algorithms to make sure your job ads are being seen by the quality of the candidates that you need to propel your business forward.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. Okay, so let's start with one of the biggest things that always bothers me, and from two perspectives, right? Like I led talent for a long time for a big brand with a lot of jobs, but then most recently I was very briefly a job seeker. And let me tell you, thumbs down on that experience, right? I was constantly, I'm going to say surprised, but I don't know why I was surprised. I know it's a problem. At even just the simple things like spelling and grammar and just incomplete sentences and stuff that didn't make any sense, much less something that as a marketer I know would have been helpful in search engine optimization. So you mentioned all of those things. So for those out in the field that haven't seen Get Optimal before, do you really just take a job description and make sure that it's optimized for SEO and that there's not spelling and grammatical errors and stuff?
You know, it's a really ridiculously obvious thing, isn't it? Because again, you're pitching a product that people don't think they need. They know they need. They know, and particularly now with, you know, hitherto millions of new people coming on the market, you really need to have the quality of candidates applying for your roles. And job ads ultimately, for me, have always been about screening and about qualifying those candidates as well. And yes, Jen, you're absolutely right. It's staggering how many job ads we pick up that aren't optimized for grammar, for spelling, and for punctuation. Just simple things. But, and this is not everybody, of course. It's not. Can't cast aspersions on my future and current clients, but people have got to give a shit. People have got to care a lot more about this piece of content that they're posting out. They've got to have some pride. So yeah, in a long-winded way to your question, we of course optimize for spelling, for punctuation and grammar, and we remove the unconscious gender bias, which none of us know ultimately is there. And I'm sure we'll touch on, there are some great tools in the market that do that. People like Texio, Grammarly. Grammarly not so much, they more optimize sentences. But I think the key thing with Optimal is, and an exciting moment in our sort of growth and development, we optimize for how candidates search for jobs. So, you know, we're using the data and insights to investigate the journey of that candidate, because we know that someone that clicks on a final job has gone through a series of searches, has clicked on different number of jobs as well, has done that research. You know, healthcare folks, they research about 25 roles before they apply for that job as well. And again, we understand across different verticals, whether it's healthcare, whether it's driving, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's retail, whether it's hospitality, what are those key elements that we really need to accentuate and to optimize in the job ad to make sure that we're, as I say, making it discoverable from the search engines, but also it's connecting with people like you. Job ads are 90% data and 10% science, 90% science and 10% art. It needs to be well written, but unless you've got those key data points optimized, it's just a great job ad that ultimately no one's going to see.
Right. And well written, right? Like from the perspective that you're talking about it, right? Like good intro paragraphs and culturally appropriate language for their organization and those sorts of things. Those are things that usually fall into like an employment branding role. So somebody typically sits out there and, you know, gives their perspective from the brand. But then the truth is, what happens is a recruiter or a hiring manager or some coordinator maybe enters in this job description language. And then that gets bolted on with a paragraph that was well intended but doesn't fit. Right. Like, so all of those things come together to make this what I'm going to call typically, craptastic version of a job ad. You know, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen when it comes to that? Because we have all different kinds of listeners. I would say that we have employment brand managers. We probably have some recruiters themselves and TA leaders. So each of them have kind of a different role in that job ad. What are some of the is you've seen on those?
Oh, how long have you got? I mean, I don't want to speak out of school, but I'm not preaching from any sort of position, because I went through this at Indeed for 9 months. It took me 9 months to get Indeed's job ads changed because people didn't think there was anything wrong with them. Although the average rejection rates for the jobs we were hiring for internally were north of 85%. So I'm not sitting here going, oh, it's so easy to do. I've lived and breathed that pain trying to convince, what was it, 26 people we had to work with to change the job ads. And some of these things were just, let's put the salary onto sales roles, because guess what? People aren't going to apply for a role unless they can see the salary type. Or again, they might apply, but they're completely the wrong band that we're hiring for as well. So it comes from a position of really wanting to help people. And also I've shared that frustration for years and years. I think with a lot of companies, Jen, it's a little bit of arrogance. It's a little bit of complacency. It's it doesn't really matter. You know, we've got a big brand. We're sexy. We're cool. We'll just put anything out and people will come. I think working with TA leaders like yourself and HR people every day, they haven't got enough time in their day to do probably half of their role well. And it's a bit like, you know, we're kind of working parents, and you feel like you're not doing your job well, or you're not being a good dad or a good mom as well. I think HR and recruiters, they have that feeling as well. So actually take that away from them. Take that responsibility away. Obviously set it up to begin with at the top level, but get, you know, somebody like Optimal to take over that responsibility. Because again, most businesses that I work with, or businesses I have worked in, they don't have anybody that's ultimately qualified to write and optimize a job ad. You know, if we think that, what was it, 79% of people in the US search online for job ads, I suppose if you think, how is your team, Jen? I don't know, maybe you could tell us, how have you reconfigured your team over the last 5 to 10 years to take into account, shit, we need a head of analytics, we need someone that understands data, we need someone that really can drill down into what an algorithm is. You know, a lot of people, I think, and it's not an Indeed sort of seminar, but I think particularly, you know, big staffing agencies, people like Michael Page, they underestimated how quick folks like Indeed, maybe LinkedIn to an extent, would overtake the marketplace. But again, there wasn't anybody, and not singling out the Page group here at all, but a lot of big staffing companies just neglected all of that data, all of the insights that was provided. And, you know, invariably the people that are MDs or directors of big global staffing companies, they're in their late 50s. They're normally sort of middle-aged white guys who are happy to buy job ads once a year and kind of keep their fingers crossed that the candidates are going to show up. So I think one of the issues is not having the right structure or the right formation of the team, or actually saying, you know, we're going to take this away from the consultants. We know that you're brilliant at sourcing, brilliant at hiring and influencing people, but we know, and you've told us for centuries, that you hate doing job ads. So we're going to take that away from you. We're going to make sure it's done to the very best sort of inch of its life, and we're going to give you that time back to go and source and place more candidates that you want to do, because guess what, you get paid and kind of we get paid.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting, right? Because one of the things that I talk about in a blog that is posted on the Joveo site is, what is the difference between a job ad and a job description? And I think a lot of times people just assume that they can't change it because other people use it, right? Like job descriptions are what comp and labor use to price jobs and all of those. But that's not what we're talking about here, right? Like that's like the formal legal sort of document of what you're agreeing to sign up for. What I'm talking about here is what you put out on the internet to get someone to apply for that job, right? Those are two different things. So I think helping people maybe understand that those two things could be the same thing if they're done really well. I've seen some done really well, but most of the time those are two a little bit different things. One's a little more what I would call alignment verbiage, Daniel. Like, so lots of people think job ads should be really salesy. Alan, I'm interested in where you fall out on this, but I sort of think it's more about alignment. I don't want a bunch of people that aren't going to ultimately be happy in the job to apply for it. So I try to be as realistic as possible. What's your thoughts on that? Do you tend to go a little more salesy, or are you a little more focused?
It really, yeah, I get it. No, it totally depends on the role, doesn't it? You know, we've been doing a disproportionate amount of registered nurses, registered mental health nurses, support workers, care workers, psychiatric nurses over the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks since sort of COVID's kicked off. And we were seeing job ads like, this is a fantastic new role. It's not. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be demanding on you emotionally and psychologically, it's going to be hard to go home some evenings because there are going to be people on the ward you're working on that have unfortunately passed away. However, you've trained for 8 years to do this job because you are amazing as an individual. You're compassionate, you're dedicated, you are, you know, you're underpaid, obviously, but you're an incredible individual. So we do, where we can, always try to not just spit bullshit out, because to your point, it's expensive finding, hiring, onboarding candidates. If you're just going to be getting in the wrong people based on something that's not real and not representative, then you know, it's a huge mistake. However, saying that, when you've got partners of ours that are hiring for Amazon over a 9-week period that have got to hire 75,000 drivers, warehouse operatives, then yeah, you know, it is a more volume-based game as well. So that will be representative in the language that you're using. And again, 71% of job seekers use their mobile phone to search and apply for a job. So I don't know if my phone's there, but you know, the real estate on the screen, let's remember, a lot of the time
Inches.
for 60% of roles, that's all they're going to read. And I don't want to reduce what my company does. My CTO will be pulling his hair out due to the incredible technology we've got. But that opening paragraph is the most important paragraph of that job ad.
100%.
They don't generally care about your mission, you know, everybody else does, particularly the board, but it's about the role. What do you do? Where do you do it? And how much are we getting cost? It's not a call out reductionist, but really think of that opening paragraph, because that's where the sweet stuff really should be sitting.